Hey guys, welcome to Tilt Shift. I'm Bryan.
I'm Tim.
And welcome to the second part, our two-part series on Harry Potter. And so just as a quick reminder, in these Harry Potter movies, there's 8 of them in total. Some of them are PG, some of them are PG-13 for mild language, some scary moments. There's some fantasy and intense violence throughout these movies, some darker things in some of them as well. So kind of keep that in mind as we go through these movies. As we talked about in the first part, maybe we'll go back and check that out. There are lots of negatives from the Harry Potter series, things to be aware of, things to watch out for, and there are positives as well. There are things that really do resonate with us, right? Because they're just showing courage or selflessness, things that are good things that we know, and really from a biblical worldview, they're good, right?
There's a reason why these have been the best-selling books of series of all time, over 500 million copies, because they do really connect with people, and it's not all just the bad stuff.
Yeah.
So, we've mentioned some of the things related to sorcery, things related to communication with the dead, some of those warnings. And in this episode, we're going to do a little bit more of covering some of the negatives, different ones, and also some positives as well. So we didn't cover everything in the first episode. That's why we're breaking it into two.
You may have thought we did, but no. Wait, there's more.
But wait, there's more. There better not be more.
Lots more. In fact, we probably won't even cover everything in just 2 episodes because there's 8 long movies.
It's like 20 hours of movies we're talking about here.
Right. Something like that. So the first thing we're going to talk about what is called situational ethics. And I think I just referenced it briefly in the last episode. But situational ethics is a system of ethics, how you decide what to do, what's the right thing to do in a situation, by which it's a system of ethics by which acts are judged within their context instead of by categorical principles. So I'm going to decide what's right and wrong in a given setting rather than this is the right action at, no matter what, because this is the standard, and this is the wrong action, these things. Just making up your mind in the moment is a situational ethic.
Which could be totally arbitrary because you could say, well, in this particular context, I can justify doing this, even though in a different context it could be wrong. But how do you know it's wrong there and right here? You're just using really a non-standard source as there's no really set standard for truth or reality, so you don't really know what to do.
What's going to benefit me the most at this time, or what do I think is the easiest way? And so that was the Webster's Dictionary. This is the Oxford Dictionary. Is flexibility in the application of moral laws according to circumstances. Now contrast that with morality rooted in God's perfectly good and holy nature.
Right.
And that's what we would say you should be striving for, is making your decision, your ethical decision based on what God has said.
And truth that is unchanging, because he is unchanging, his truth is unchanging, which gives us a sure foundation to live and think off of.
So in the Harry Potter series, there's plenty of times where Harry and his friends, or sometimes not even just his friends, but other people, are following this situational ethics where they're deciding what to do in the moment of what's the right thing to do. And we're going to see in certain instances where sometimes they're rewarded for that. And so this first one, you have a scene where we looked at Neville in the last one. He's kind of clumsy. Well, in this one, he got clumsy and he gets hurt. And so they're rushing off to the hospital ward, and they're learning how to fly brooms for the first time.
Oh, yeah.
And Draco takes off with something that belongs to Neville, his Remember-All, and this is what Harry does.
What's the matter, Potter? Bit beyond your reach.
Harry, no way. You heard what Madam Hoop said. Besides, you don't even know how to fly. What an idiot.
Evidently he does.
The natural.
Give it here, Malfoy, or I'll knock you off your broom.
Is that...
And then Malfoy throws it. Harry saves it. Well, he broke the rule. The teacher said if anybody leaves the ground, you're going to be kicked out of school
at all. They're supposed to wait for teacher
before you can
back.
say Quidditch, the name of their sport. And so that Harry has a desire to do something right. There's a bully, Draco Malfoy, who's kind of Harry's nemesis for a lot of the series. Right. And so he's, in a sense, being a bully. So Harry might have good intentions, but that wasn't the right way to go about it.
Yeah.
He could have talked to a teacher when she came back and said, by the way, here's what happened. I know that makes you sound like a tattletale, but that's better than breaking the rules. So does Harry get in trouble for this?
No, not at all. That's the really hard part about it, too, because it'd been one thing if he got in trouble. Like, we know you meant well, but how you broke the rules. Therefore, there are consequences. Learn from that. Instead, after he breaks the rules, they can see he can fly really well on his broom. So they're like, the teacher takes him like, oh, no, he's going to the principal's office now.
And in the book, he's thinking, I'm going to get expelled, because this is right after he starts. He thinks, I'm going to get kicked out of school now and have to go back to the Dursleys. And
so she marches him right up to whoever's the head of the team there. I forget the name of the sport. Quidditch, right?
Quidditch, yeah.
Yeah, Quidditch, right? And so she goes, hey, well, here is your new seeker, because Harry can fly really well. And they're like, oh, new team member. And there are no consequences whatsoever for him breaking the rules that she had said.
Yeah, he's being rewarded.
He's actually being rewarded.
Right. And now it would have been one thing if they would have said, you got a week's detention. By the way, we had to tell you about, here's
We'd
a
like
sport.
you to try out for this.
Yes,
You should
exactly.
go do that. You're good at that.
And you could do both.
Yeah.
But they didn't do that. And that happens quite a bit in this series. So that's one of the things that concerned me from early on when my students were saying, how come you don't watch it?
Yeah.
It was the situational ethics. And because we have to be aware of the messaging the messages that sends to young people. And we'll see in some other clips where that can get very confusing.
Yeah.
So in this one, we're going to see more situational ethics. This is at the end of the second one. Harry and Ron have saved the school and saved Ginny's life. And
all good.
All good, but they broke some rules to do it, as Dumbledore says.
Both realize, of course, that in the past few hours, you have broken perhaps a dozen school rules.
Yes, sir.
And there is sufficient evidence to have you both expelled.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Therefore, it is only fitting that you both receive special awards for services to the school.
So very similar.
Yeah.
It could have been, thank you, boys, for saving the school, saving Ginny, your sister's life, Ron, your future wife, Harry.
Just so you know, FYI. Spoiler alert to Harry. Right?
So kudos to you for doing that, but you did violate these rules. And so there's this, a lot of times what it is, it's like the ends justify the means. Like, well, because I want to do this, it's okay for me to break these rules. And there may be a time and place for that, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. But these, especially the first one, was not that setting.
And that's so dangerous because, especially in the real world, in our sinful selves, we can find any number of reasons to justify what we do, right? And so in situational ethics, if you're practicing that, it really kind of makes you the determiner of what is right and what is wrong. It makes you the authority, and you can then interpret your context and say, oh, I think I can do this. I can justify doing this.
I make my own rules.
And that's always dangerous because of our sinful nature. Whereas within the biblical worldview, there's something beyond ourselves that dictates what is truth, and we are to submit to God and His truth, which helps protect us from that.
Yeah. So in the third movie, you have Harry's aunt who comes to their house.
A very
Dursley's house.
likable woman.
Oh, she's so mean to him and abusive and
really
mocking
is.
his mom and dad.
Yeah.
We talked about that just a little bit in how he's been beaten down. That was one instance. Well, Harry loses his temper and something happens to her because of Harry's use of magic.
Kind of turns into a hot air balloon.
Sort of like that, yeah, which is dangerous to her. And the Minister of Magic, who's kind of like the president or prime minister sort of thing, he just laughs it off.
Yeah.
Big deal, because there's a bigger deal that they're messing with. But he's not supposed to do underage magic. He should have been in trouble. And even though he didn't realize exactly what he was doing because he lost his cool, there's another example where bad behavior is either ignored or not necessarily rewarded in that case like it was in the other ones. He sneaks around Hogwarts a lot of times. They're not supposed to be out of their rooms after a certain time, and he does it multiple times under his invisibility cloak.
Sometimes for a good reason, sometimes just for a selfish reason, honestly.
Or sometimes he's just curious.
Yeah.
And he doesn't have to do it at that time. He sneaks into Hogsmeade, which is this nearby town that once they're old enough in school, they can go to it. But he's not allowed because he didn't have parental permission. His aunt and uncle didn't sign off on it before he left. And so he can't go in. Well, he sneaks in under his cloak again, or he goes in through this tunnel. He's breaking the rules when he doesn't have to. And many times he's not punished for that. Here's another clip where he's disrespectful to a teacher. Now, this is a teacher who has been very mean to him, and most people would think very unfairly. We do find out more about his character as the thing goes on, but this is Professor Snape, who is played brilliantly by Alan Rickman, who seems to play every character brilliantly. But
Potter, what are you doing wandering the corridors at night?
I was sleepwalking.
How extraordinarily like your father you are, Potter. He too was exceedingly arrogant, strutting about the castle.
My dad didn't strut, and nor do I. Now, if you don't mind, I would appreciate it if you could lower your wand.
Turn out your pockets. Turn out your pockets. What's this?
It's a bare bit of parchment.
Really? Open it.
it's a magical map that is blank unless you know the right phrase to say. And so what happens is Snape's able to try to make it say something, but it kind of mocks him because it was actually put together by Harry's dad and his buddies when they were in school, who did not get along with Snape. In fact, they were kind of rivals as well. Right. And so Snape's never liked Harry as a result of that. But it doesn't excuse Harry being disrespectful. So when he reads that message, which is kind of rude, you can tell he kind of enjoys it. Like, oh, that's funny. I'm glad they got to take a dig at Professor Snape. And but he lied to him. He wasn't sleepwalking.
Yeah, he wasn't. And then actually what happens is Lupin shows up to actually kind of to rescue Harry more in a sense.
Who was one of the guys who helped create the map, one of his dad's buddies. Yep.
Right. And so, and he intervenes and stops it, but he doesn't discipline Harry for what he was doing. He just kind of gets Harry away from Snape.
And he does take the map for a time through the rest of the school year and then gives it back to him. What happens so often with because of the situational ethics, sometimes he's punished harshly by teachers when he doesn't deserve it.
Unfairly.
Snape is one of them. Umbridge, who we're going to see in a little bit, does it a lot.
Your favorite character,
yes,
right?
Yours too.
Everybody's favorite character.
Yes. But he's rewarded by the nice ones, even when he does something wrong sometimes. And so that can be very confusing for young people and for adults as well. Yeah. When you're watching this, if you're trying to figure out what's the right or wrong decision to make, and do you base it on how does somebody who likes me respond versus how does somebody who doesn't like me respond? No.
Is it up to me? Is there something beyond myself to determine what's right and wrong here? Yeah.
And so that's one of the things that had always concerned me about the series. And one thing I noticed when I did finally choose to read through the series a few years ago, I recognized that Harry's not a Christian.
It must be very exciting being a detective.
I mean, I knew that already, but
sure, that's a fair point.
Why am I imposing Christian morality on a character who's not portrayed as a Christian?
Right.
And so it's understandable why he is doing those things.
That character in that series does those things.
Yes. Yeah. But it also is concerning that you have somebody who is looked up to by so many people behaving in this way. And again, yes, he's a young kid at the beginning of the series. It's understandable why he loses his temper, why he makes some of the decisions. And sometimes you root for him because you're like, oh, I'm glad he finally got that little dig in at Professor Snape. It's like, no, but that's not the right mentality.
And we're not saying that as Christians, there's never a time to go against what the authorities are saying, right? Of course, the Bible does tell us to respect authority, to give to Caesar what is Caesar's, and that God gives the sword to government for a reason, right? And so we're to respect that, honor that to the best of our ability. But also, the Bible is clear that we are to obey God rather than man. We see that on multiple occasions. You think about Acts chapter 4, verse 18, where, Peter says, no, we got to obey God rather than man. And they're willing to face the consequences of that.
Right, they're leaders of the people told them, stop preaching in Jesus' name. They're like, yeah, whatever. I mean, that's the modern paraphrase. They're like, yes, you can say that if you want. We're going to keep on doing it. And where do we see them? They go right back to the temple and start preaching in Jesus' name.
And you see that again and again. And the attitude's almost to them like to the authorities who are trying to squash this upwelling of this Christian ideology. They're kind of saying to them, hey, listen, you do what you think you got to do, but I'm going to obey my God, no matter what it costs me. And there's still even a respect as you see it done from that way, but it's also an allegiance to God first and foremost.
And so from an ethical perspective, sometimes people refer to that as graded absolutism. So it's like, okay, yes, I'm supposed to follow this authority, but if that authority directly contradicts what the higher authority is telling me, that's when I can ignore this authority, but still face the consequences.
Still face it.
And so you see that with the Hebrew midwives when Pharaoh says, if it's a baby boy, kill him. And it says they didn't.
Right.
They refused to do it because they feared God, and they let the male children live. And then God dealt well with them. He blessed them for doing that. So even though their authority said, do this, it's wrong to murder these babies, so no. And so they didn't do it.
A lot of people in our culture could learn from them today.
Yes, exactly. Now, in this next clip, we're going to see that what's happened in the 5th year, a lot of what we're going to cover in this episode has to do with what happens in the 5th year at Hogwarts. So by the end of the 4th one, Voldemort has returned.
Right.
But it's kind of in private. Harry is the only one from the good side who saw him. And so there's a question of, did he really return? And
actually, if you've seen the movies or know the story, it wasn't just that Harry saw him alone, but Harry was with another person who was well loved by Hogwarts and people there, and that kid dies.
Right, and we saw both of them in a clip. He was warning him about the dragons. That's Cedric Diggory. Yeah,
he comes back dead, and so they had to take Harry's word for it that it wasn't Harry's fault or Harry did it, and that. So I mean, there's these circumstances around his claims as well that make it suspect to people.
Right, and so what happens is the Ministry of Magic, which is kind of like their government, puts a new teacher in the school.
Boo! Boo!
Professor Umbridge, who is your favorite, and she's
Everybody.
prohibiting the students from learning how to defend themselves against the dark arts. That's one of their classes throughout is defense against the dark arts. Well, she starts teaching it, and she's like, we're just going to read books. We're not going to,
Right.
She doesn't teach them anything. Now, Harry does, she calls him a liar in the first class period. He does respond to her in a disrespectful way. He gets detention. He talks back to her. She tortures him.
Tortures.
It's pretty brutal.
She's easy not to like, all right, as you watch
She's
the movie.
one of the most unlikable characters you could ever imagine in fiction. And because, well, we'll see. So in this one, the students are talking about how she's stopping them from learning how to defend themselves.
Foul, evil old gargoyle. We're not learning how to defend ourselves. We're not learning how to pass our owls. She's taking over the entire school.
Security has been and will remain the ministry's top priority. Furthermore, we have convincing evidence that these disappearances are the work of notorious mass murderer Sirius Black. Make no mistake, we will hunt
Sirius?
down and find him forever.
What are you doing here?
Answering your letter. You said you were worried about Umbridge. What's she doing? Training you to kill half-breeds.
Sirius, she's not letting us use magic at all.
Well, I'm not surprised. The latest intelligence is that Fudge doesn't want you trained in combat.
Combat? What does he think? We're forming some sort of wizard army?
Well, that's exactly what he thinks. That Dumbledore is assembling his own forces to take on the Ministry. He's becoming more paranoid by the minute. The others wouldn't want me telling you this, Harry. But things aren't going at all well with the Order. Fudge is blocking the truth at every turn, and these disappearances are just how it started before. Voldemort is on the move.
So we see Sirius Black speaking out of the fire. That's Harry's godfather.
Right.
That was his dad's best friend.
And actually a good guy.
Yes.
Although,
He's the one who's being called a mass murderer,
Right.
and the Ministry of Magic and the Daily Prophet, which is their media, and we'll see more from them, that they've been, in a sense, gaslighting Harry and also Sirius Black, spreading rumors about him because they don't want to face up to what's true.
Right.
And so so Umbridge refuses to allow them to learn how to defend themselves because she thinks it's absurd to think that they didn't have to. What
There's probably an
danger is there?
underlying motive to that as well for her, and
Yes.
what her loyalties lie. We see that later on in the movie series.
Exactly. And so Fudge is the Minister of Magic at this time, sort of, like I said before, kind of like the Prime Minister.
type.
Yep.
Yeah.
And he's apparently concerned that Dumbledore wants his position, which makes no sense in the series because he's already been offered it multiple times and he's turned it down. He doesn't want
Paranoid,
it.
basically.
Yes. And so what's happened is the truth is he's a politician who's afraid to make the hard decisions that might be unpopular, but could save a whole lot of trouble in the end. Instead, he's just going to kick it down the road, pretend the bad's not happening.
Yeah.
Not listening. Not listening.
Very similar to what a lot of politicians do because they're just kind of concerned about their next election or whatever it might be, rather than, I've got to take a stand and do the right thing. It may be unpopular,
Right.
but it's the right thing.
Yeah.
And as a result, things get worse and worse and worse as we go along. And so we're going to see a little bit of that gaslighting of what happens.
Which that happens through, he controls the media, essentially.
Yes.
So when those who have that power and those who want to push a particular narrative or ideology and they have the media in their pocket, they can push those things and skew reality, at least to the perception of those who are listening to what the media says.
And we see that in a very strong way in the fifth movie and also in the seventh and eighth ones. We'll see that quite a bit. So with their paper, it's called the Daily Prophet. We'll see a little bit here.
He's been attacking Dumbledore as well. Fudge is using all his power, including his influence at the Daily Prophet, to smear anyone who claims the Dark Lord has returned.
Why?
The Minister thinks Dumbledore's after his job.
But that's insane. No one in their right mind could believe that Dumbledore...
Exactly the point. Fudge isn't in his right mind. It's been twisted and warped by fear. Now, fear makes people do terrible things, Harry. The last time Voldemort gained power, he almost destroyed everything we hold most dear. Now he's returned, and I'm afraid the Minister will do almost anything to avoid facing that terrifying truth.
We think Voldemort.
So fear makes people do terrible
things. So
And
true.
Yeah, so Harry's a victim of propaganda here. We see the boy who lies rather than the boy who lives. We see Fudge saying all is well. Well, all is not well. You have Voldemort, his minions, essentially, the Death Eaters, are infiltrating the ministry, and they're taking people out, and they're doing all sorts of things, and they're just kind of sweeping it under the rug. Oh, it can't be that bad. And then there's this big escape from the prison called Azkaban, where a lot of the Death Eaters are. He breaks, and they
blame it all on Sirius.
And Sirius, who's sitting there at the table right there with Harry, knows he's innocent, and so they blame him.